Every mile drives the economy, from the drivers who fill the shelves to the professionals, investments, and innovations that support it. Behind it all are decisions made every day, under pressure and at scale. Hosted by leaders from across the industry, this is Cents Per Mile, insights that drive better decisions, a CVTA Life production.
Welcome back to the Cents Per Mile podcast. I'm Karen Smirchek, president of Viria Trucking, and I am joined by my colleagues, Kevin Hall, CEO of Cub Ventures and CDL Life, along with Thom Albrecht of Reliance Partners. Before we get rolling, be sure to like, subscribe, and comment below, or head on over to centspermilepodcast.com to submit a topic for us to review on a future show. Today, we are going to be diving in and discussing CDL training. And that's something near and dear to my heart at Viria Trucking, because back in 2016, we created our own driving academy as a way to create a pipeline for our drivers and ensuring that we had safe, productive, reliable drivers joining our organization. So definitely a lot of my background has been poured into this topic and have a lot of passion for it. Kevin, you have some similar passions around this.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, look, we're all about CDL Life. We're all about the truck driver. I mean, that's our community. That's who we try to support. And, obviously there's an exodus of drivers in a lot of different ways. And how do you stream in high quality drivers, right? You need high quality training, high quality schools to be able to do that. And from a CDL Life perspective, if we have an avenue to partner with organizations that have that same passion and that same focus of mentality of really bringing in those high quality students and producing high quality drivers, at the end of the day, giving these people a career, giving carriers a great resource, we are all over that. For us, we just want to give these graduating students a community to belong to, and that's really what they find at CDL Life. So very, very, very happy and honored to partner with CVTA, who our guest is today. We'll introduce in just a bit, to just bring two organizations together that care about trucking, that want to focus on doing the right things, and finding the synergies that exist with that to promote high quality schools and producing those high quality students for the resources that are out there.
There's definitely a crackdown happening on CDL schools today. And that's what some of the things we're going to dive into is how did it get so bad, and what are the standout schools doing well that makes a carrier attracted to have one of their students come into their finishing program. And just with that, I'm going to introduce you to our guest today, Andrew, as the executive director of the Commercial Vehicle Training Association, better known as CVTA. And he is leading the organization's advocacy events and strategic initiatives on behalf of the commercial driver training providers nationwide. So, Andrew, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Karen, thank you for that introduction. Yes, indeed. My name is Andrew Poliakoff. I'm the executive director of the Commercial Vehicle Training Association. CVTA is the largest association of professional truck driver training programs in the United States. We have 100 school members with about 400 locations in 46 states that train over 100,000 entry-level drivers each year. CVTA has existed since 1997, and for those last 30 years, the people as part of this CVTA community have been pushing to increase the professionalism and opportunities in the CDL space, but also, especially recently, really pushing for greater enforcement of national standards. So you may be well aware that in 2022, the entry-level driver training ELDT final rule came out of FMCSA. And in short order, a lot of the schools at CVTA noticed that rule was not being enforced in anywhere near the shape that folks would have wanted. This really centers around this training provider registry and the proliferation of what we would call bad actors that began to enter that space. And, folks doing things like offering 2 and 3 day training, really out of bounds and not a common sense means of providing training in any way. And so our task force since 2022 has been persuading, cajoling, pleading, pounding the table at FMCSA, Congress, anyone that will listen to try and have greater enforcement be part of that framework. And indeed, over the last year or so, we've seen USDOT and FMCSA really take this on and begin to remove these bad actors from that registry and to do greater enforcement altogether in the training space.
Awesome. Well, thanks for sharing those details with us. And, I think why we're here today is there's been a crackdown on Class A CDL schools. And, July 16th, the USDOT announced nearly 10,000 training providers being removed from the FMCSA's training provider registry. And to me, that number is huge. It feels like a demolition, but really portions of that were cleanup of inactive schools, things such as that. Do you have any color to add on insight with that headline?
Sure. So let's see. I think many members of CVTA's task force would call 10,000 a good start. There are probably still a lot more. CVTA schools operate in this space every day. They have been prior to ELDT's promulgation and enforcement in 2022, and they operate in this space now. And so while it's great to see those large numbers, and we really do applaud the efforts that FMCSA has taken, at the same time, if you are operating and you see that there's still, 1, 2, 3 or more folks that are offering 2-day training down the street from you, you can stay grumpy in a hurry, obviously. So what we're pleased to see, there's a lot of things I think that are part of the good news in this space. I think a lot of this has brought sort of some solid attention to how much cleanup was needed, and we're happy to see that FMCSA has done that. They've done it through administrative removals, like you just mentioned, Karen, around people who were inactive or wouldn't reply to correspondence from FMCSA, but they've also done it through 2 now sort of large-scale audits, right? And CVTA schools have been pleased to pass their audits, et cetera, with flying colors. But, at the same time, one of the things that's been really lost in translation, especially with all of the press coverage of the tragic crashes that have caused a lot of this enforcement, or at least brought it to bear into the national attention, is that one of the reasons, there's really 2 reasons why you would want to do this sort of enforcement. One is it just makes sense to remove bad actors because they're unsafe and dangerous and confuse people as to where they're supposed to be going to school. But at the same time, when you remove those bad actors from the space, you really allow these providers who've been doing it the right way for decades to shine. And so it's much easier for someone who's interested in getting involved in a career as a truck driver to know where to go. So we applaud FMCSA for doing this. There's been a lot of different forms, whether they be administrative or these audits, but FMCSA and administrator bars are really doing a great job right now.
Seems to be the theme in trucking today, right? Like we just a few episodes back, Karen and I, we were chatting about how getting the bad carriers out, the ones that just truly did not follow the rules, that hired the people that were maybe coming out of these schools because they knew exactly what they were getting and how easy that was, and the pressure that put on a company like Viria, right, that was doing it the right way. I mean, it's taking competition away. It's adding competition that's really not valid, and so. Honestly, I applaud your persistence. I can't imagine being in there, seeing the legislation, knowing the issues, and seeing no action from that. But that seems to be the theme right now in trucking. So you got to applaud the folks who are actually trying to make change. But what's the current status? Like, where are we truly at? How much more do we have to do to get some of these bad actors cleaned out?
Well, I think one of the things we'd like to see is something that is in motion in some form, which is that part of the problem that occurred here was that when the original rule was conceived, it was anticipated that FMCSA was going to collect a lot of important information from these training providers on the way in. That is before they got onto this training provider registry. And that would come in the form of things as simple as their state licensure documents or their curriculum or their lesson plans, a variety of different documents that support the healthiness of their business activities. And what we saw instead was a self-certification process. So one of the things that's important is FMCSA has indicated that they'll be doing a rulemaking to strengthen certification requirements on the way in. At the same time, FMCSA has been cleaning up through other means, through these audits and through administrative removals, the folks that shouldn't be on there. However, I think we'd like to see them get a little bit better at targeting and sort of creating algorithms or whatever fancy means they want to use to understand, other than just having CVTA tell them about these bad actors, really how to find the folks that are operating at the fringe still, right? It's a very, very, very large data set. And I think we're confident, now that we're seeing a lot more activity and some great leadership there, that they'll continue to march down that road. But, the state of the union is that there's more to do, and they're in motion now doing great things, but we want to see more of it.
Trucks run on diesel, but America runs on truck drivers. Every day, they keep shelves stocked, businesses moving, and our economy alive. With nearly 60 million views and 2.9 million followers, this is where drivers live. If you are looking for drivers, they're at CDL Life.
So Kevin and Andrew, just a little perspective for the audience. I believe in 2019, there were about 6,000 approved entities in the TPR. And then as of last November, before the crackdown started, it was over 39,500. So it was just this colossal growth. Andrew, you mentioned the self-certification, but I also want to delve into, you mentioned the entry-level driver training that was introduced in 2022, but essentially lay dormant. So why did the FMCSA introduce it? They must have seen a need. And then why did it lay dormant?
Great. So let's see. In 2015, Congress, it even goes a little bit further back than that, but we'll say in the modern era, in 2015, Congress instructed FMCSA to create national training standards. And what that created in itself, that legislation and statute, was that FMCSA convened a negotiated rulemaking. And so this is the sort of unicorn of a very rare activity in the federal space where all of these stakeholders came together to negotiate and discuss a rule that they all would agree upon through consensus. And so that happened in 2015. There were, I think, 26 members of that entry-level driver training advisory committee, the LTAC. CVTA was involved. The National Association of Publicly Funded Truck Driving Schools was involved. Motor carriers, safety advocates, insurance companies, municipalities, many disparate groups that don't necessarily agree on everything all the time were together in that room and worked on that for months and months, hashing out what these modules would be, what the training would be, what the requirements would be, and came to a consensus on that. Then, for those of us familiar with the pace of the federal government, it really took until 2022 for that to become enforceable federal law. So it's not that it lay dormant, it's just that it got into that federal sort of process. And then there were a lot of people from the sidelines saying, we need more time, we need, X, Y, and Z, and FMCSA listened to that. So it did not become enforceable federal law until February of 2022.
I would just add, what was the trucking market in February of 2022? Right? And you had a lot of carriers seeking out drivers, which I think really created the demand for schools to get rewarded for not doing the right thing.
That's right. I mean, there was an amazing need at that time. Very different market, right? Post, or during COVID, we could even call it. And so I think it was an extraordinary time. And look, people are, it's sort of, these are, I don't know if we want to go so far as to call it crimes of opportunity, but maybe non-compliance activities of opportunity. And so that was the market demand, I think, pushed people into taking actions they perhaps wouldn't have. I think there were a lot of people just sort of in the country that were keen to engage in fraud on certain levels. And, thank goodness here in 2025 and into 2026, we've seen that really get dealt with.
And I'm giving FMCSA so much recognition and accolades for the cleanup that they've really completed for us. That the training provider registry was built not as an accreditation tool, but really a self-certified list, which next week we're going to be diving in the self-certified ELD providers, right? So it's like we got two issues in our industry, and self-certify is part of it. So just really saying, I think we can check that off as something we didn't do right.
So Andrew, what are the quality schools doing? Like I mean, obviously compliance, but to me, compliance is like minimum system requirements, right? You've got to do the right things, operate your business in the right way. But really, what are those standout schools? What are they doing differently, and how do they produce the drivers that carriers want to hire? That I want my kid driving down the road side by side at 70 miles an hour in a big rig, right? What are they doing differently?
Well, I think one of the key things that they do is to really utilize this pretty robust proficiency documentation concept, right? That has been something, originally, I think for many years, CVTA was focused on total program hours. I think that's, certainly a great way to be among sort of the best by saying, we have X amount of hours and we're really training robustly in that framework. But let's not forget, ELDT is a proficiency-based standard. And there are some people that, if you want to talk about 160 total program hours, there's some people who could, who are fully ready to train after that, or they may be ready to train if they've had some prior experience, before that. But by the same token, there are many people who might go all the way through training and still have no business being a truck driver. And so I think focusing on that proficiency and just, really documenting that in the way that so many of these 21st century tools allow is the way that folks, I think, feel really strong and confident about the drivers that they are creating. Also, CVTA schools have had great partnerships with some of these major organizations and carriers that hire entry-level drivers. Let's not forget that the vast majority of carriers don't operate in that space. And so having strong relationships with these major carriers that hire entry-level drivers from schools is, I think, a key to understanding that as well. So I would say it really relies on proficiency, teaching the standard. I think that there was an interesting sentiment I heard some time ago. It's like, the people that want to be part of the community that is seeking out enforcement, that is focused on the standards, is a great way to know that you're dealing with, a credible actor in that space. And so CVTA folks have always sort of, I think, come together in that way to say, look, we want to be part of this organization that's talking about the best ways to do things, that's finding innovative ways to document the training and to have that be robust and high quality. And so it's sort of the secret sauce of coming together in that community and everyone really striving forward to be the best. Think about it like joining a gym, right? If you belong to a gym, you may not work out every day, but if you're going there, if you're striving and working hard, you're going to see other people there working hard and doing the right thing, and you're just going to it's going to get into your blood.
So, Andrew, I want to ask you, you kind of opened up the elephant in the room there around training standards. And I think for the audience, we can all relate to maybe back when we were in school. Some kids learn really fast, some learn at a medium pace and others are very slow learners. And I think that's been part of the resistance to a minimum number of hours. I know the ATA at one point opposed that. I don't know where they stand today. But I think what is wrong with, let's say, a minimum being established, say, somewhere between 160 and 240 hours? And before you answer that, I got my hair cut last week with Kelly, and I asked her this question. And in the state of Tennessee where I live, it takes 1,600 hours, which is going to be between 9 and 10 months before you are licensed as a professional hair cutter. Same thing with my plumber. It was more than a year. So it's not intended to be a gotcha, but it seems like from the public's perspective, some sort of a minimum that would make sense along with the skill proficiency. So if you could run with that a little bit.
Sure. Let's see. Well, total program hours has some incredible. Let's start with this. I think what people are typically discussing are hands-on behind the wheel hours, right? And the standards there that are being discussed are sort of CVTA had 30 total program hours as a requirement for a very long time. The problem with total program hours is that they have some catastrophic downstream effects for Title IV funding. And so I think behind the wheel hours are what people are typically talking about. But here's what I want to say. You mentioned the haircut sort of anecdote there a moment ago. I have a 12-year-old son who my wife and I work very hard to make sure that he's getting A's in all of his classes. And when he tells me, if he were to tell me, hey, Dad, I got a C, but I studied for 10 hours, I don't care. There is no time. There's no amount of time. You have to study until you are ready to be proficient, to be successful. And so one of the great things that has arisen out of this CVTA community has been the use of these tools to document proficiency. There are a number of folks that operate in this space, and these systems really do allow instructors to input information that lets them know, okay, this person is taking a little bit longer and I'm documenting that. This person is really getting it quickly and I'm documenting that. And so I think we view this sort of as these training or these proficiency documentation tools that exist now, these systems, as really the means of assessing that. I think it really makes sense for, no offense, anecdotal conversations out in the world of like, hey, we should have minimum hours. That sort of makes sense. And I appreciate that sentiment, but I can just say from the folks that are doing this every day and really working with a lot of different students with different backgrounds, focusing on you are done when you are done. You are not done before then, you're not done after. And the other challenge with hours is you have a lot of folks out there right now who aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing on the training provider registry anyway, right? You have a whole swath of people still offering, 2-day, 3-day training out there. If you tell them that they have to do, 20 hours of, minimum hands-on behind the wheel training, they're just going to type 20 and hit enter, right? So I would prefer to see something that, where FMCSA took in that proficiency documentation and used that as the standard.
Yeah, I got on the plane the other day and saw this kid, and I was like, wow, that's kind of interesting. Is he like dressed up for Halloween or what? But he had a pilot uniform on. I was like, wow, what? He was the pilot. It's like, I don't care at the end of the day how long he trained, what he did. If he can fly that plane and manage through crises or whatever that is, I'm okay. Pilots are getting younger and younger every day. It's just maybe a thing with me. But so yeah, for me, you get the flip side of that. If they do 1,000 hours, 10,000 hours, 2 hours, 20 hours, is that the measure? Like we still want them to be able to have proficiency, be able to drive, be able to be safe, and not just based on an hours number, right?
Andrew, what do we do to create sustainability? Because elections come and go, and I don't want to interject politics per se in this, but priorities of administrations change. And I think there's a fear by the compliant, honest trucking companies in America whether it's around driver schools or a whole host of issues, fraud, theft, compliance, you name it, that, this is not going to be sustainable if things are not codified under the law. What do you believe needs to happen specific to commercial vehicle training of people to make this sustainable regardless of administrations?
That's a great question. I certainly think that once we saw, a lot of the delay and the dormancy, Tom, that you mentioned earlier occurred before that ELDT final rule was actually promulgated and enforced. When things are in that FMCSA Office of Policy, it's a lot easier for them to just sort of hang out. And even if you create a rule but you don't enforce it, then again, there's not a whole lot of continuity. Now that we are in a space where FMCSA has been robustly enforcing that rule, it's in the Office of Safety, the Office of Safety Programs, and they have an entire sort of apparatus and a cadence built in that space. I think the likelihood of seeing that just sort of fall away is quite unlikely. Still, I appreciate that you may have the sort of the vagaries of different administrations, but once things at FMCSA get into the enforcement space, I think it's way more difficult for future administrations to roll them back. Especially, I think if we see that self-certification model change, I think that's a positive. If that rulemaking advances, not if, but hopefully when that advances, I think that's another arrow in the quiver of FMCSA. And again, I will say, it's not that prior administrations, whether they be that Democrat or Republican, weren't interested in this. It's just that it really had not, it had not been promulgated. It had not been enforceable. And so now that we're in a space where it is enforceable and being enforced, I think the chances of that being reduced are low, especially because safety is a bipartisan issue.
Tom, I want to turn that back over to you. You had some really good questions for Andrew and around that minimum level of training, and just how different administrations function. But don't you really feel like this falls back to the insurance and underwriting world of who they're willing to insure? That, at one point, nobody was hiring a driver unless they had a minimum of 2 years of driving experience. And then those drivers that, or the carriers that were hiring them, proved to their insurance provider that they had a solid finishing program, which created, a successful driver that both was safe and productive. So, and now at one point it was like, hey, we can ask them to be in contract with us for 24 months because, hey, we invested all of this money up front to pay you through your training. And now these drivers are getting sought after sometimes at the 3-month mark. So we've invested everything in them. And then that person who now has insurance that is saying, yes, your minimum hiring is only 6 months.
Well, there's a lot in there. I think one of the most interesting things is going to be the fallout from the Montgomery SCOTUS case, because that alone may do more for safety on highways than any single other act. So, for example, the freight brokers right now, they're all they want to look at motor carriers that have been in business at least a year. And prior to Montgomery, there were some large brokers you had to be in business less than a week. And so as also there are some negative verdicts, which will come back to the underwriters and they'll not like that. I think over the next 3 to 5 years, we may see the most sweeping set of changes that represent a confluence of how brokers have to look at safety, how underwriters will incur losses from constituents like freight brokers they never imagined, and just a general scrutiny. I think more will be done as a result of private enterprise than the government, even though the government kind of helped launch this focus on compliance. It may not be the perfect answer that you were looking for, but I find it an amazing time. A lot of folks are coming together, a lot of different constituents.
Well, and I'd love to, if we're talking about sort of the broader health of the industry picking up, I would love to say that I attended the uh, White House Freedom Haulers event the other day, which was really extraordinary. That is sort of an initiative where the Trump administration has, and USDOT and another Department of Veterans Affairs have all really come together to focus on these programs that exist in the veteran space that allow for sort of contemplating the skill sets and the activities that veterans have partaken in their military service, whether it be driving heavy vehicles and making it easier for them to obtain CDLs. And that's extraordinary. At the same time, this larger narrative, I think, is so important, because one of the things that's been lost in a lot of the national media attention around these tragic crashes that have caused the enforcement is that trucking is an absolutely outstanding career. Shout out to my brother Mike in Virginia, who's a trucker and has been one for a number of years now. Really transforms people's lives. And veterans have a great ability to take on these roles, great skill sets to become truck drivers and to capitalize on that great career, this honorable American service profession. And I think it's important that while that initiative is focused specifically on veterans, I think it's, Secretary Duffy's words there were important, that this is a great career for veterans and all Americans, right? And so I think that as we see the private sector taking steps to scrutinize, Tom, as you say, all of these business activities, sort of the Wild West that has been hiding in plain sight in many instances all through the trucking industry, you're also having this narrative out there of like, look, trucking is a great career. People should be interested in this. And I think that any opportunities we have to make those points are important, because if you were to just turn on, the news these days and watch some of the stories about the crackdowns and the accidents, you're really missing the whole thing, which is trucking is a great career. There are great schools that have been out there for decades and decades, and the health of that is being improved by a lot of these steps that are being taken by the administration to scrutinize and oversee the space.
Andrew, thank you for those words. I think that truly just sums it up, that you cannot build a safe and a productive driver in a 2-day CDL program. And several schools recently have been shut down, and the schools left standing are the ones that are doing it right. And now our job is to send them students, hire their graduate, because anyone promising a CDL fast isn't going to be one that we want on our highways. So with that, want to thank my colleagues for joining me today. Andrew, thanks for joining us. Like, subscribe, comment, head over to centspermilepodcast.com and tell us what you think about the show, or if there's a topic that you would like covered.